It was great to see so many volunteers and supporters of SANS at our online events that we ran during July, talking about SANS and Covid-19, the impact and how SANS responded. If you missed it, this is an opportunity for you to catch up with a recording of Claire's presentation from those events. There are links in the description below to some of the resources and information that she refers to in her presentation. And don't forget to like and subscribe to get more content from SANS as we produce it.
So, as I've said, this is our networking event for this year. And really importantly, starting with that voice of bereaved parents. That's why we're here, and that's why SANS is so unique and so special. SANS was there when I needed them. It really helped to talk and cry with someone who understood what I was going through. And I think that sums up why SANS is so important, and that voice of bereaved parents. As we go through this presentation, I think you'll see how incredibly important, we know it is always, but how especially important it's been through this COVID crisis to listen to it and make sure it's been heard. So what I want to do through this event is really, as I've said, to share how we've responded to the COVID crisis. And this point about the relevance of our work, I think it's extraordinary how everything that we do has been important and is needed. And I think that we should feel very proud of that, and very proud of the fact of how important our work has been and continues to be. There are, however, challenges, and I'm going to outline those and thinking about how we're going to navigate through to make sure that we're sailing safely through. But above all, to reflect on the strength of our vision. And as I've said, that voice of bereaved parents being at the heart of everything we do. So this PowerPoint, through the impact, we'll look at how we've provided information and support, how we're trying to maintain income, what some of the financial challenges might be, have a look at what we did in SANS Awareness Month, and then think a little bit about the way ahead. And as I say, we'll kind of break 3 times through the presentation, but then at the end have a moment where we'll share a whiteboard and just collect all of our thoughts and ideas around what we've learnt and what's next, really. So, the impact of COVID, really difficult to think back now, isn't it, to that moment in March when everything started. But then the messages were very clear. It was about staying at home. It was about that social distancing. Most importantly, maybe from our perspective, it was about taking actions to protect the NHS from being overwhelmed. And as we'll see, all of these have had an impact on SANS, all of those messages. But at the beginning, they were very much a kind of that's where the crisis was for everybody. And at that moment, when many charities, I think, found it very difficult in that the glare of the headlights right at the beginning to think what to do, we had our amazing vision and our core aims. And our amazing vision for a world where fewer babies die, and when a baby does die, anyone affected receives the best possible care and support for as long as it's needed. That was like a pole star. We had that vision, and we knew that our core aims were to make sure bereavement support was there for all who needed it, that everybody should have excellent bereavement care, and we should try to save babies' lives. And it was, I think, we're so lucky to have such an amazing vision and such clear aims that even when the world around us was in chaos, we could steer and work out what we needed to do. We didn't get kind of buffeted around. We knew exactly what needed to happen and where we needed to be guided to. So with that vision, those core aims, we started to try and do an initial analysis and a focus on what of those things should we focus on doing. And I think right back in March, the potential risk to babies was a big worry for us. And the fact there was so much fear and so much uncertainty. So to respond to that, we felt it was really important to focus on providing support and clear information for bereaved parents and families, for pregnant women, but also for the NHS staff who were as frightened and as uncertain as everybody at that stage. We also thought, and very soon realised, that there would be quite a significant drop in income. So this potential drop in income. So the other area of focus was to try and maintain our income. And in March, we were anticipating a drop. It could have been anything up to 50% of our original budget, and all eyes on how did we maintain income, because that would have been catastrophic, dropping 50%. So that first bit, providing information and support, how did we go about doing that? Well, in terms of providing support, we already had our amazing helpline, the Bereavement Support Services team who manned the helpline, but making sure that it was open at times that people could access it, that it was there for everyone. The online community, making sure again that people knew about that, could access it. Grief chat, which is available via the website. Making sure that social media was another way that we provide support through that, but was there and available. And of course, our book and our app. And I think it's really, really important to reflect on the fact that the use of the helpline has been increasing throughout the crisis. And we've seen a 30% increase in June on the figures in May. And May was more than April, which was more than March. And I think 15,000 more views on the online community, page views, in June than in May, and that was before April. So what we are doing is of enormous use to people out there. And I think that's really wonderful that we have that. In addition, we felt that all of you wonderful groups would need to and would want to try and support the bereaved parents in your areas as well. And I know many of you have been doing a fantastic job providing both the Zoom virtual support meetings, but being on the phone, talking to people, having your own Facebook pages and conversations, and the amazing way that people have been innovative and reached out. And I think that would be lovely to have a chat about that when we get to the end of the PowerPoint, what different people have been doing. In addition to that, the Bereavement Support Services team have been providing a fortnightly session for befrienders to provide that extra support, both for the fact that you're providing your own support in different ways, but also because of the kind of things that you're all hearing and experiencing. And I think the feedback we've got is that that's been very helpful. And I think maybe that's something we'll look at continuing, that kind of direct support on a regular basis and supervision for befrienders. We also set up a closed Facebook page to provide another channel of support for those people who like that. In terms of providing information for everyone, again, we had things in place, but we just needed to make sure that they were absolutely right. So the website, a lot of time in those first few weeks was spent updating it, making sure that all of the guidance was there, that there were links to the Royal Colleges, to the NHS, to everything that was needed. Again, updating social media, really using that to amplify the key messages that needed to get out, to amplify the signposting, making sure that nobody felt confused, that you could land on our website and think, okay, this is, you know, the information's either here or I know exactly where to go to get it. We also developed a couple of extra things to provide information, and these were particularly for healthcare professionals, because as I said right back in the beginning, I think a lot of fear and misunderstanding and uncertainty for healthcare professionals, particularly around how they should provide bereavement care in such difficult circumstances, and we'll talk about that a bit more. So elements of the training have been taken into providing webinars, and these have been amazingly successful, being sold out very, well, not sold because they're free, but booked out very, very rapidly. And I think if any of you have questions about that, I'm sure Kate can talk about that later on. But to back that up, we've also got a sort of a bi-monthly or twice a month bulletin for healthcare professionals, which gives all of the information. Again, the signposting provides all of those links that they need to provide good bereavement care. So when we started in the beginning of the crisis, we thought we could anticipate what some of those challenges would be. And as I say, some of our information and support was arranged around that. So we anticipated that for those who were very sadly bereaved during the pandemic, they would need information on how registration of deaths of stillbirths had changed, and also how funerals had changed. So we did a lot of information on the website to make sure that we had all of that there. We also felt that there would be that lack of immediate support because of the social distancing, the staying at home, and trying to find ways to connect people to provide that support ourselves if we possibly could. We were very aware that those who'd been bereaved before the pandemic were facing all sorts of triggers to their own grief, the isolation, the fear, the fact that anniversaries might come and you'd be stuck in your house, unable to go out, unable to market in the way that you might normally. So again, many things that we wanted to try and reach out and provide support around. And then we were very aware that there was a specific group that would find it really, really difficult, and that was those who were pregnant after the death of a baby. Understandably, their fears for their baby and themselves would probably be much worse, and so many changes in the NHS provision of care. And so very specifically thinking about what information and what support would this group of people need. So we had all of that, and we were thinking about it, and as I say, sort of looking at information and support and thinking, what do we need to do? What's the provision? How can we meet those challenges? But I think what we hadn't expected were these additional challenges that we learnt about. And we initially learnt about these through the bereavement support services team. So all of those channels of support that I've been talking about, those were receiving the kind of the feedback from there, but also from all of you in your groups, and groups were telling us of things that they were hearing as well, and very upsetting things for everybody. We then decided to go out and do a survey, the SANS survey, to see if we could get a bit more information, so asking some specific questions, and that gave us quite a bit of data. And that was all from parents, but we specifically then used our National Bereavement Care Pathway sites, both in England and Scotland, to ask for feedback from healthcare professionals about what they were seeing and experiencing as well. And finally, we worked with all of the other pregnancy and baby loss charities to see what they were hearing and experiencing. So together we were putting together a really powerful picture of all of those challenges that we hadn't anticipated. And it became very clear that we needed to do something with this feedback, that it was upsetting, it was wrong, and we needed to change things. We couldn't just hear it, we needed to do something with it. So we used our feedback and made that feedback loop that allowed us to drive the change that we knew bereaved parents and families needed us to do. So what we did as part of sharing the feedback to drive the changes was analyse what we were hearing first, because we thought if we just dump a whole lot of feedback in front of people, they're probably not going to listen. Whereas if we analyse it a bit, it'll be easier for people to think about what actions need to be taken. And we felt that what we were hearing broke down really into three groups. There were those, we've called them unavoidable changes. So there were those things that were happening because of mostly the steps that were taken to protect the NHS, but also the social distancing. And an example of this would be the fact that some of the bereavement suites were redeployed into COVID wards. So that was part of the NHS response to COVID. Another unavoidable change was the fact that all NHS staff started to wear, obviously, PPE, and that barrier to being able to provide bereavement care, or any sort of care really. And what we wanted for those changes was for them to return to normal as soon as possible. So how soon can we get the bereavement suites back? How soon can we make sure that bereavement midwives are in place and that PPE can be taken off? And that's our ask, really. How soon can you return to normal? How can we help you do that? There was then a whole group of things that we've called unintended consequences. And these included things like the very strong stay-at-home message at the beginning of the crisis resulted in mothers who had fears and worries about their baby, maybe the baby's movements, maybe something else, actually not getting into hospital and getting the treatment that they needed. And those sort of unintended consequences, so that the thing that shouldn't have happened at all, we wanted to work with the NHS, with influences, Royal Colleges, to make sure that if there's a second spike or another time, that does not ever happen again. So those unintended consequences. And then the third category that we call possible new ways of working. So maybe there are some good things coming out of this, maybe not, but if we think they might work, they must be evaluated. And a good example of this is the virtual antenatal appointments that quite a lot of the obstetricians like, but actually it needs to be evaluated to work out whether parents like them as well before they are sort of introduced far and wide. So with that analysis, we shared all of that with the government, with the chair of the Health Select Committees. In fact, it was the government in all 4 nations we shared it with the NHS, again, across the UK, and NHS Improvement, and of course with the Royal Colleges. And what I want to share with you now are 3 slides looking at different aspects: bereavement care, pregnancy after loss, and maternity care, to show you some of the things that we very sadly heard, but what we've managed to do about it as a result. So one of the things that was really, really hard to hear about bereavement care was partners not being allowed to be with mothers during the scan. So some people getting the news that their baby had died when they were on their own because the partner hadn't been allowed into the hospital. And this seemed to be just so cruel and so unnecessary in many cases that we worked with the Society of Radiographers to change the guidelines where possible. So in some of those scanning rooms, there was plenty of space for a partner to be in there, and that wasn't a problem at all. Where there wasn't enough space, the partner could either wait outside or a little bit further away, but could be there to be called in. And if it really, for whatever reason, wasn't possible, to be able to actually either take a kind of a video recording or try and connect through virtual means. The other thing that I've referred to already was the bereavement suites and midwives being redeployed. And what became really obvious here was that we needed to work with the NHS and Royal Colleges to understand what space then could be available, that you might need the bereavement suite, but where could parents be on their own and quietly. And if the bereavement midwife wasn't there, if she'd been redeployed, how could we be sure that the midwives or the healthcare professionals there knew what to do, knew how to provide bereavement care, and they needed to ensure that some sort of training or webinar had taken place. And again, that was something that we could work with the NHS and provide that training. really sad was where there was no time for memory making. And that was particularly right at the beginning, where people were very fearful of the virus, and everything was very, very rushed. And I think what was really important for us there was to take people back and focus on the 9 bereavement standards and how to deliver those. So things like the memory making, even if you can't do it as you used to do it before before COVID, there are so many ways that you can help parents make memories. And we suggested and discussed cold cots for parents to take the baby home with them so that they had time to make memories there. Lots of different thoughts and ideas that we could share, again, through these webinars, through the bulletins, to try and help, and working on new guidelines, especially with the Royal College of Midwives, so that everybody knew what they should be doing and could be doing, even if it wasn't what they might usually do. And of course, we've talked about PPE being a barrier to good care. And I think this was a good example of trying to share good practice, again, through the bulletin, through the Royal Colleges, that really painful to hear parents' experiences, but also healthcare professionals saying how awful it was to feel unable to provide the kind of care that they wanted to. But one of the things that we heard that we were able to share that was actually in Scotland were healthcare professionals coming into a room and lifting their mask and showing their faces, so at least the parent could see who they were, and then putting the mask on and moving forward to provide the care. So it was sharing good practice, and working with all of you as well as everybody else to hear if there's good practice out there, we can share it. And another very difficult thing we heard was not just the delays in postmortems, but then the results being posted straight to parents. So parents having no warning, but absolutely no understanding in many cases of what they were seeing and reading, and no support for that. So we talked to both the Royal College of Pathologists, who have sorted out the fact that there shouldn't be delays in postmortems, and the Royal College of Obs and Gynae, who are committing to make sure that those appointments to discuss postmortems are putting back in place. So that's just a small snapshot of some of the things that we were immediately able to do to try and make bereavement care better. And then looking at pregnancy after loss, what we heard, again, this partners not being allowed to be with mothers during scans or antenatal appointments. And I think what we tried to explain, and I think we were very successful doing this, was what a unique group of people that these parents were going through the crisis, experiencing pregnancy after loss, and how supported they needed to be. And in this instance, as I've said, we worked to help the guidelines be changed around scans, but also the guidelines have been changed around antenatal appointments, and a mother should now be allowed to take whoever she wants, one person with her, to antenatal appointments. We also heard about growth scans being cancelled. And again, working with the NHS. In fact, I was on a call this afternoon about this as well, and that commitment that no growth scans should be cancelled at all, that they should be prioritised. Particular problem around the antenatal appointments not providing reassurance, and actually, if you're not in a room with somebody, you can't give the same reassurance that's needed. And again, highlighting that, discussing it with both the Royal College of Obs and Gynae and with the Royal College of Midwives, explaining why this is such a problem. So they have tried to put back in all of the antenatal appointments for pregnancy after loss. There are 6 that everybody has to have face-to-face now, but they're trying to include more for this particular group of people. And then finally, the feedback we heard about maternity care in general. And of course, this is of interest because of the issues relating to safety and of trying to save babies' lives. And that right back, as I said, right back at that beginning, that stay-at-home message, meaning that sometimes mothers were sent home and told to stay at home by healthcare professionals. Sometimes they were too frightened themselves to go into hospital. And that was particularly BAME communities affected. And what we did there was work very fast with NHS England and the Royal Colleges to amend that messaging. And as soon as we all realised what was happening, they went out very strongly. In fact, they used an animation to go out to say, come in as soon as you are worried about your baby. Do not stay at home. This is a moment you must come in. Again, we've talked about the scans cancelling, and we've worked to change those, and about those virtual antenatal appointments. And what's really important is that although some mothers are confident taking their own blood pressure and doing urine and glucose testing, definitely not everybody is. And of course, you can't measure the growth of the baby in the same way. So again, that's we're asking for that to be reviewed. So what do we know? We know for certain that from all of this, the negative consequences that we're seeing are as a result of social distancing, lockdown, and those steps taken to avoid the NHS being overwhelmed. We're involved and supporting some of the research that started immediately, that's ongoing, but it seems to show very clearly that the risk from the virus itself for mothers and babies was relatively small. So the impact has all come from the steps that have been taken. What's likely is that BAME communities have been disproportionately affected, and we need more evidence on that. Very sadly, what we don't know yet is whether perinatal mortality rates have been affected. There's some anecdotal feedback that it might well have been, but the stats that come out from Embrace and ONS are always retrospective. And I think that's flagged up for us that actually that's not good enough. We should have a better system in this country for knowing what the perinatal mortality rate is, and doing something about it. So that's what we're doing. I know you're all doing a massive amount in terms of the support that you're giving, and through the support and what you're hearing, it would be wonderful if you could share what you're hearing in terms of people's experiences of bereavement care, maternity care. Are things getting back to normal? What we've done so far is that kind of overarching look at what's happening, but now it's really helpful to focus with you specifically. So if there is a hospital where things aren't changing, we can help work with that particular hospital, or if there's a trust that's taking a slightly different approach, again, we can help with that. And also that voice of bereaved parents being so important in terms of informing others. So for instance, employers wanting to hear from parents what it's been like going back to work. So it's hearing from you that's so important. So I just wanted to reiterate really, because I think this shows how beautifully our core aims work together, and why focusing on providing support, making sure care is excellent, and saving babies' lives work so beautifully together. Because if we start in that box on the left with all of those, most of the writing in, we offer support for all those affected, we commit to excellent care and to saving babies' lives. And because we do that, both parents and healthcare professionals contact us for support and for information. And because they do that, we hear those experiences of maternity and bereavement care. And because we're involved in both the maternity care with the Saving Babies' Lives and the bereavement care, we can listen to those and develop resources to help improve the care, but also then go to those influencers to highlight the changes that we can see are needed. And because we do all of that, that reinforces our position as being the organisation that holds those three core aims in such a perfect circle together. And what I put up here is relevant, respected and sought after. And that's become so apparent through this crisis that what we're doing is so relevant. It helps make it better for others, but it provides support straight away. We're held in great respect anyway, but even more so through this, and we're being sought out as the organisation that can provide that help, those ideas, that feedback in a way that many other organisations aren't at all. And it makes me so proud of what SANS has done and continues to achieve. So going right back, those two things that we were going to focus on right at the beginning, the providing the information and support, which I've just talked about. The other thing was maintaining income. And this slide, I think, just highlights what I know you will all know, that all of those mass participation events, those community fundraising events, that the kind of the bread and butter for SANS of where our income comes from, were all cancelled, postponed, just gone. And that's clearly a massive issue for us in terms of income generation. So a very clear focus by that team that have done just phenomenally well at taking the outside landscape, if you like, and thinking, okay, that's that, what can we do that actually will see us through this? And the first thing is applying for every crisis grant or award that we're eligible for. Second way is developing digital and virtual ways to fundraise within restrictions. And I know if anyone joins Leanne in her fundraising breakout room later, she will talk a little bit more about that. But the innovation of trying to take things that should be out there and make them things that you can do digitally and virtually has been amazing. Obviously setting up the Resilience Fund and having that as a kind of a backbone going forward, and working with trusts and corporates in particular, because for many of them, finding opportunities to support charities has been their way of trying to kind of contribute into the crisis. Particularly working with all of you as groups from the beginning of June, obviously trying to roll out charity checkout, or Infuse, I think it's called now, and making sure that you're very involved in all of those digital and virtual fundraising ideas. And the team's been incredibly successful. The government grants have been incredible, with the Department of Health and Social Care, that very large grant that was announced. At the bit underneath this bit here is the announcement, the 22 million awarded to life-saving health charities. So we were one of the few charities that was identified as life-saving, and I thought, yeah, that's it really, that's us. Scotland, we were also successful, and Northern Ireland, and enormous thanks to Tommy for this, because SJ said it was Tommy who carried the day, so that's thank you to Tommy for that. And then the actual fundraising income itself for April, May and June has exceeded the budget, exceeded what we thought we'd be able to bring in, although obviously compared to last year it's still significantly less, and at the moment we're running somewhere between 25% and 30% less than last year, but luckily not as much as that 50% that we'd feared. But again, we are going into a big recession, so it's difficult to know. So what can you do to help about maintaining income? If you can get involved with fundraising, please do so. I know not everybody can, and it's not possible to do some of the things that you might normally do. But if you can't yourself, if you see any grant or trust funding opportunities around, please just alert our team. Or if you know of any organisations, corporate organisations who'd like to support SANS, again, that would be wonderful. And similarly, the campaigning, the getting that parent's voice out there is really important as well. So any of those things would be enormously helpful. So the financial challenges, I mean, I think everyone's very aware that we're going into a recession. We are in a recession, and that in itself is an issue for charities, because especially if you rely on individual giving, as SANS does, that is obviously has an impact. But I think just generally, it's very difficult for charities at the moment. I think for all sorts of different reasons, and not only the kind of the way that we normally fundraise, but I think just struggling to find that kind of that relevance and being able to kind of feel connected. I think if we had Dan here, he can talk at length about how difficult it is, and I think just understanding that we're not alone is important. I think that all charities are facing these challenges. When we started March, we were absolutely on target with our reserves and our, you know, the on budget and everything. What was extraordinary was that middle point in March, when lockdown came in and when everything sort of kicked off, the difference in those 2 weeks to the end of March showed already that really significant drop, and overall the income in March was half what had been forecast. At that point, if you projected that kind of impact out further through the months and potentially years, that became quite a worrying picture. So straight away at that point, we furloughed a third of SANS staff who are still on furlough at the moment. All of the working staff took pay reductions. We started some very formal scenario planning and putting together revised budgets, and the expenditure was monitored so closely that and there still is a daily review of cash levels and receipts, and yes, a lot of focus on expenditure. So the scenarios that we developed were based on the sector predictions, but also the general economic predictions. And we looked at a percentage reduction in income from last year. So the best case scenario would be a 25% reduction, and the worst case scenario, a 55% reduction. At the moment, we're somewhere between 1 and 2, but the board, as I say, it's really difficult to know what the next few months are going to hold. And in May, the board agreed that we should plan for scenario 3, because really this is not a kind of a decision that you can get wrong. If you go for a scenario that is too little, you've got nowhere to come back from at all. So we needed to try and make that safe decision for SANS. And that planning for that scenario meant that we needed additional in-year savings of 750k, which is a big figure. And that made up from those government grants, the additional income that I've been talking about, also trusts and funds doing really a lot of work there, all that fundraising and the resilience fund. The in-year savings, as I said, cutting all the expenditure, saving office costs. One of the things that is coming up is the lease in the London office is expiring in March, and everybody is used to working at home now. I think it's not necessarily going forward, we'd have a much smaller office, but it's not necessary to go straight into an office if we don't have the money to do so, if we need to use our money on other things. So it's looking at things like that, and looking at, as I said, furloughing and salary reductions. I think sadly it's still not going to be enough, and we're going to have to look at more savings from the salary line. But all of this together is a focus on making sure that SANS comes through this safely. So what can all of you do to help? Well, obviously centrally we've been very focused on that cutting expenditure, as well as trying to get income in. And I think we just, and I'm sure you all are, monitoring expenditure. And it's just that kind of being prudent, knowing that you know, for SANS money is tight, and we just all need to watch what we're spending. The other thing that we've said just to pause new projects until the next financial year. And I think obviously there are projects that are underway and, you know, halfway through. I think that the pausing allows us to have the money in the kind of the project pots where necessary, so that we can, it's there as a buffer, if you like. But I think now is not the time to have to go off as a sort of and have all sorts of new ideas and think, oh, we're going to do that. Hold on to the good ideas, and there will be a moment in the future where we can all start that growth again that I know we're going to get to. This contraction is a phase we're going to, and we will get to that point of growth, and that will be a lovely time to do all of the things like think of the new projects and things. And as we've talked about, supporting fundraising, really, really important if and when you can. And obviously groups all do fantastically, but those who are wider than groups are other volunteers, people who don't necessarily part of a group but support SANS. And again, trying to pull everybody in that family of SANS. If we all do this together, it will make it much, much easier. So what I want to share now is June and SANS Awareness Month, and what an amazing month it was. And again, just a wonderful moment to come together and think what a lot we are doing and how extraordinarily powerful it is when we all work together, and that sort of feedback of all elements of SANS working beautifully together. So the theme, as I'm sure you all know, was finding the words, supporting the NHS to support families. And this felt really right, because that theme of trying to support healthcare professionals all the way through the crisis sort of was being more explicit to the outside world about what we were doing as well. Obviously wanting to support the NHS as much as we could to try and make the improvements that we could see needed to happen, but also a really good opportunity to showcase all of the things that we could do to help, our webinars, our resources, that, you know, we can do that we've been doing that beautifully for so long. This is, you know, what we're good at. And through the month, lots of things happened. There were the social media and the animations, but we also launched the webinars that I talked about earlier, and the bulletin was going out. We did sort of standalone things like speaking. Mark and Claire spoke at this maternity midwifery forum. So lots of external events to be at and to kind of showcase, if you like, what we were doing. And those are actually quotes from healthcare professionals. This is the first one is a bereavement midwife talking about Geeta, who is, I think, is her consultant. She wrote saying, thank you so much for your support. And I think in that one, it was support in helping getting memory boxes and materials that were needed. But it was that kind of really personal, you know, so happy that we were able to help them get the resources. And then feedback on the webinars, everything in great detail. Loved how focused it was on the experiences of parents. And again, pulling back to that voice of bereaved parents being so powerful. And the fundraising, fantastic fundraising. The middle bit, that walk with us, supporting the NHS step by step, was that wonderful kind of link to the supporting the NHS, but all sorts of other things going on and people doing amazing events. I just have to highlight the little 2-year-old girl. I think this is Bristol, wasn't it? Those of you in Bristol SANS, I can see the kind of nodding. That was just extraordinary. She looked like sort of an 18-year-old in her confidence on her bike, the way she was zipping along, and was doing it for her sister Lily. So everybody from the smallest to the kind of the older, everyone was doing different things. So it was lovely, really good way to celebrate. And then of course, during June, although it SANS Awareness Month, other things happen as well. And then Father's Day, a real focus through social media of reaching out and providing support for in different ways for different groups of fathers. And right at the beginning, there's of course the volunteering week, and a lovely opportunity to say an enormous thank you to all of our wonderful volunteers, and at the end we'll share another thank you to all of you, because without everything that all of you do as volunteers, none of this would work or be possible at all. And then of course the Garden Day, which is always in June and is usually at the National Arboretum, and I think in the last couple of years we've had up to 200 people, but by having it online the reach was, I have to double check with Jen, but I think it was something like 2,000 in the end, or getting up towards 2,000 people could attend. And I suppose that's been the flip side of COVID, is that by using social media in different ways, our reach has improved enormously, and lots of people saying, you know, they'd never been able to go before, but they could go because it was online, and makes us sort of think maybe we should be streaming events like this. How can we, you know, make them take the best of both worlds, if you like, and go forward with that. So I've sort of shared with you an overview of what the last 3.5 months, 4 months have been like, and it feels as if we've been on an amazing journey, and underpinning all of that, the wonderful vision, our core aims, but also our values. And I think that's what's so special about SANS, all of these things at the heart of what we do, and our values of being evidence-based, using the evidence, the feedback that we were hearing, and actually using it, doing something with it, has been incredibly powerful. Being collaborative, being enormously collaborative within SANS, everybody working with everybody else, none of those silos, just everybody focusing on what needed to be done, but collaborative outside as well, instead of just saying this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong about maternity care, bereavement care, actually going to the influencers and saying, this isn't right, but how can we help you to put, you know, to put things right. But above all, compassionate. And I think that's what's so important for SANS, is the fact that we are compassionate to everybody that we're here for. And that obviously is bereaved parents and families, but it's also for the healthcare professionals to reach out and to help them as well, and to each other. And I think that compassion and that working together has been very, very powerful. So I think it's right to end with another quote. And I think this is why we're all here. This is why SANS is so important. Thanks to SANS, we rebuilt our world after it fell apart. And that's why we're so important. And I can only end by saying a massive thank you to all of you, because it's all of you who make SANS what it is. And it's just such a privilege to be able to share all of this that we've done, but to know that it's because of you that we've done it.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to know more about anything mentioned in the video, you can get hold of us at volunteering@sans.org.uk. Hope to see you in person soon.